My name is Lauren Blake, and I'm 34 years old. You embarrassed me, Lauren. Again. That's the first thing my mother says as I step forward to hand her the framed commendation letter. Not thank you not, I'm glad you came, not even my name in warmth. Just that. Sharp, clean, designed to cut. The lights in the hotel ballroom are too bright, and the air smells like expensive candles trying to cover champagne and ego. It's her retirement celebration, Principal Blake's farewell, after 36 years of ruling the city's most prestigious prep school. Every politician, every headmaster, every gossip columnist who's ever smiled in her direction is here tonight clapping like well-trained seals. I'm seated way in the back next to the doors where the waitstaff enter. My sister Alexis is front row center pink silk dress, baby bump, and a diamond bracelet that sparkles every time she raises her wine glass for more water. Of course she's drinking water. Pregnant perfection. I'm in a tailored black blazer, conservative, civilian. I debated for half an hour whether to wear the silver lapel pin, a signal almost no one here would understand. I wore it anyway. And now I'm standing in front of my mother, gift extended heart quietly racing, and she says that line loud enough for the people behind her to hear. You embarrassed me, Lauren. Again, she's smiling, always smiling. Her voice is sugar, but her eyes are stone. And I realize she planned this. I don't belong in the narrative she's built for herself. I never did. And my presence, however polite, is a loose thread she needs to snip. I keep my voice calm. It's for your study. You always said you wished Dad's letter had been framed. She doesn't even look down at it. I said I didn't want you in uniform, she says, glancing around at the guests. At least you listened to that. There it is, the real moment, the little twist of the knife. She couldn't stop herself. I feel my throat tightening, the kind of tight you learn to breathe through during hostage de-escalation drills. I scan the room not for an exit, but for dignity, for air. My fingers tremble just slightly as I place the frame down on the edge of the podium. And then I see him. Far back in the room, just outside the ring of chandeliers, a man in a decorated military uniform. Real uniform. Class A dress green, square shoulders, crisp creases, silver eagles. My brain identifies him before my eyes finish the job. Colonel Nathaniel Rourke. And he's staring right at me. His cup of coffee slips from his hand. It crashes to the floor, brown liquid splattering across polished marble. A few heads turn. He doesn't move to clean it. Doesn't blink. He just stares. Then he mouths one word. A single word. Not Lauren, not Miss. Ma'am. It isn't just a greeting. It's protocol, recognition, deference. My mother turns annoyed by the spill. She sees the uniform first, then follows his line of sight back to me. Her expression flickers just for a second. Confusion. No. Something sharper. I don't speak. I don't explain. I step back from the stage and return to my table, walking slow, controlled. I feel people looking now. The ripple has started. Colonel Rourke bends slightly and begins mopping up the mess with a cloth napkin, but he's still watching me. Not her. Me. My mother adjusts her microphone and forces a chuckle. Well, she says thank you for that. Surprise. The crowd titters unsure. My sister shoots a look toward the colonel, then to me, but says nothing. I sit, fold my hands, exhale through my nose. The frame with my father's old commendation sits untouched on the edge of the podium. The glass catches the overhead lights. Everyone's attention has already moved back to the speech, but Colonel Rourke isn't looking at the podium. Or the speech. He's still looking at me, and I know exactly why. Because once not that long ago, I wasn't just Lauren, I was his commanding officer. And the truth my mother has spent years suppressing, smoothing over, denying, hiding is about to rupture into full view, not through argument, not through confrontation, just one word, one spill, one whisper. Ma'am. People always asked what it was like being the daughter of Principal Margaret Blake. I used to say it was like living inside a glass cathedral, beautiful cold and never allowed to touch anything without gloves. We grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. The Blake name carried weight there. old Southern Roots church ties, Ivy League brochures mailed to our house like clockwork. My mother ran Palmetto Academy like it was a private kingdom. Her dress always matched the occasion. Her heels never clicked out of rhythm. And her daughters were meant to follow suit. Alexis did. I didn't. She wanted to be the ideal Southern daughter White Pearl's piano recitals, marrying a man whose family name had 2 hyphens. By 17, Alexis had invitations to 3 debutante balls. By 24, she was married to the son of a state senator. She had baby showers with monogrammed napkins, Christmas cards with golden edges. I joined the Army at 19, not because I hated them, not even because I wanted to rebel, because I needed to feel real. I still remember the look on my mother's face when I told her, like I'd announced I was eloping with a convicted felon. She stared at me from across the kitchen table, untouched coffee in front of her, and said, "You'll ruin your hands, not your life, not your body. Your hands." I laughed. I think it hurt her that I laughed, but I didn't care. "You're supposed to be more than that, Lauren," she said. What she meant was I was supposed to be her. Instead, I went through basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, then advanced language and psych operations training at Fort Bragg. I served 2 tours overseas. My second deployment got complicated. Our mission was officially advisory, but the terrain, the politics and the lies underneath the mission messy. Unstable, and exactly the kind of chaos I knew how to manage. By 30, I had 2 commendations for field leadership, 1 injury that didn't make the press release, and 1 command assignment in psychological operations that required a clearance level most civilians don't know exists. But back home, I was just Lauren, the unmarried one, the intense one, the difficult daughter who sent postcards instead of holiday photos. When I flew in for my father's stroke years after we'd stopped speaking regularly, I stood in the hospital room uniform pressed, and my mother didn't even ask about the stripes on my shoulder. She greeted me like a distant cousin, shook my hand. At the funeral, she insisted on listing only Alexis in the obituary. Said it was simpler. I sat in the back row. Didn't even wear my medals. Not out of humility, out of exhaustion. She couldn't erase me from the world, but she could erase me from hers. And for a long time, I let her. I let Charleston become Alexis's city. I let my past stay classified. I let my mother pretend I was just some phase she hoped would pass. But something cracked last year. I don't remember the trigger. Maybe it was seeing Alexis's second baby announcement posted without tagging me, or maybe it was that video of a young soldier's mom hugging her in tears while mine still acted like I'd joined the circus. But something in me decided no more silence. I didn't need applause. I just wanted truth. So I requested reassignment. Not to active duty, I was past that, but as a civilian liaison to Psychological Operations Command with a rotational station at the Pentagon. The funny thing is, my mother never asked what I was doing now. She assumed I was temping. Or worse, resting. What I was really doing, debriefing strategy teams, reviewing encrypted footage from Black Ops missions, prepping briefing folders for senior officers who couldn't pronounce half the names on the locations we studied. And once a month, I met with Colonel Rourke. He had been a senior officer in my final overseas unit, stern, brilliant, by the book. But behind closed doors, he once said, "I don't like being outranked by someone half my age, but I trust you with my life, ma'am." That title, ma'am, meant more than just formality. In that world, it was survival. It was acknowledgement. And that's the thing my mother never understood. She thought respect came from Christmas cards, cocktail dresses, and last names on country club plaques. I learned that real respect shows up in silence, in restraint, in the way a room shifts when someone powerful enters but says nothing. So when I heard about her retirement event, I RSVP'd quietly. Didn't call, didn't email, just wrote attending on the form, and picked out a black blazer that matched nothing because I wasn't there to blend in. I was there to be seen. But I still didn't expect Rourke to be there, and I definitely didn't expect him to drop his coffee when he saw me. That moment, his eyes the stunned recognition, the word ma'am slipping from his lips before he could catch it. That was the shift. Not just in the room. In me. And as I sat there watching my mother fake laugh her way back into control, I knew she could host her perfect night. But she couldn't rewrite what just happened. Someone saw me, and she couldn't unsee it. The hardest part about being ignored isn't the silence, it's the precision of it. Like when you text your mother a photo from a re-enlistment ceremony and she responds, "Is that jacket too tight?" Or when you send a care package from Afghanistan and months later find it unopened, still stacked in the guest room under a box labeled holiday decor. It wasn't always cold. Not at first. When I got back from my first deployment, she made soup, not from scratch, but she heated it up, and that was something. She asked surface-level questions how the base was, what the food was like, but she never touched the hard parts, never asked what I'd seen, who I'd lost, who I became. After the second tour, she didn't even pick me up from the airport, said she was helping Alexis pick out baby shower decorations. I told myself I didn't care. I had learned to travel light inside and out, but the cuts added up, especially the way Alexis played into it. She never said anything cruel, but she never said anything at all when it counted, like when Mom left me off the family newsletter entirely, or when I showed up to Thanksgiving and my name card wasn't on the table, so I ate from a folding chair by the window. Alexis just sipped wine and made small talk about the nursery color, or the year I mailed out custom ornaments to everyone, glass globes with their names etched in gold, and Alexis posted a photo of the family tree, with mine accidentally turned around the blank back facing out. They called me sensitive, said I read into things, said I was always so intense. Of course I was. I had to be. They didn't see the years I spent in forward operating bases with sand in my boots and mortars cracking overhead. They didn't feel what it was like to stand next to someone whose pulse just stopped and keep speaking calmly into your radio like you weren't shaking inside. They didn't understand how I learned to hold trauma in my ribs like a second set of lungs. But that was the thing about my mother, she only valued what other people could admire. War medals didn't match the drapes. Top secret commendations. Sounds dramatic. Even my physical scars, faint burns from a brief explosion during a convoy intercept, were seen as unbecoming. Once, while I was changing in her guest room, she walked in by accident. Her eyes landed on the thin, raised skin on my side. She paused, frowned, and said, "Is that permanent?" I said yes. She just nodded and backed out slowly, like I'd spilled something on her carpet. But the worst came last winter. I had been stationed in D.C. for 8 months working in civilian support for strategic PSYOP briefings. Nothing flashy, but vital. I kept my head down, didn't ask for praise. Then one night, I got a text from Alexis. "Can you cover for me at Mom's New Year's party? I'm not feeling well." It was short notice, but I said yes. I threw on a navy dress, bought a bottle of decent wine, and drove 3 hours to Charleston. When I arrived, the house was already glowing with guests, old school friends, deans, board members, the kind of crowd Mom thrived in. I knocked, then stepped inside. The music stopped. Everyone turned. Not in a warm, surprised way, in an oh no kind of way. And then my mother appeared descending the stairs, slowly, champagne flute in hand, in a velvet dress like royalty. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom and said, "Lauren, what are you doing here?" I blinked. Alexis said she asked me to come. She gave a tight smile. She canceled. We adjusted the seating. There really isn't room. I stood there dumb, wine bottle in hand, wearing heels that suddenly felt like bricks. A few of the guests exchanged looks. Someone cleared their throat. My mother didn't flinch. I can just say hello to a few people, then go." I offered, hating how small my voice sounded. "I think that would make things more awkward," she said, not unkindly. Just firm. Like she was giving me an out, like she was managing a mess. I nodded, turned around, and left. I didn't cry in the car. I just stared at the steering wheel for 27 minutes before driving to a gas station, eating stale chips and sleeping in a Holiday Inn off Route 17. I never told anyone. Not Alexis, not Rourke. Not even the guy I'd been casually seeing back in D.C., who'd been a Green Beret himself and would have probably driven to Charleston to say a few words on my behalf with fists. I just buried it, with everything else. But something inside shifted that night. Because you can only be erased so many times before you stop caring how clean the lines are. I started keeping my distance. I didn't answer Alexis's calls as much. I declined the Easter brunch. I left her birthday card unsigned. And I made peace with the fact that if my mother wanted to build a life that didn't include me, I'd stop handing her bricks. Then, 3 months later, came the email from Palmetto Academy's Alumni Committee. You are cordially invited to attend the retirement celebration of Principal Margaret Blake. I almost deleted it. But then I saw the guest list attachment, dozens of names, former teachers, city council members, and at the bottom, Colonel Nathaniel Rourke, scheduled to give a speech on civic discipline and leadership. That's when the plan formed, not a scheme, not revenge, just presence. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd let someone she admired remind her who I was, without saying a single word. A week after my mother's party, I found myself standing at Arlington. It was a gray afternoon, the kind of cold that seeps through your sleeves no matter how well you dress. I stood beside a simple white headstone boots still coated with road salt hands clenched in my coat pockets. Staff Sergeant Elena Rhodes, killed in a convoy ambush 3 years ago this week. I hadn't seen her since we were pulled apart at the field hospital. I didn't even get to speak at her memorial. Her family requested privacy, and that meant no contact, no tribute, no goodbyes. But she saved my life. So I came back every year, quietly, no fanfare, no camera, no uniform, just me. And every time I brought one thing, a worn field patch from our deployment unit with the ink faded and the stitching fraying at the edge, I laid it at the base of her headstone, a silent offering. And for a second I let myself miss her. Really miss her. Not as a soldier, as a person. She was the only one who ever saw past my edges in the field. She once told me, "You walk like someone's always watching, but you think like nobody ever will." I didn't understand what she meant back then. I do now. Because that week after the incident at the retirement party, after Rourke dropped the coffee, after my mother clumsily recovered, after Alexis texted me Mom didn't mean anything by it, I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit before. I was mourning someone who was still alive, not Elena, myself, the version of me that believed I could someday earn my mother's approval, the one who still sent cards, still tried to blend in, still answered every forced family group chat with a thumbs-up emoji. She was gone, and I buried her here too, alongside Elena, not out of spite, out of mercy. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened the footlocker at the bottom of my closet. I hadn't touched it in months. Inside were my badges, service awards, field commendations, a folded flag, a photo from our unit's final debrief. We were all filthy, sunburned, exhausted, but smiling. Behind it, tucked in a protective case, was the one item I'd never shown anyone outside a military circle, a rare commendation letter stamped with the highest clearance seal. It didn't even list the operation name, just the date, and the phrase actions rendered above and beyond the standard engagement scope. Only 7 of us received it, and only 2 are still alive. I ran my fingers over the seal. You're not supposed to take pride in this kind of thing, especially not in PSYOP where secrecy matters more than medals. But in that moment, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by silence, I felt a bitter heat rise in my chest. Why did it matter if nobody knew? Why did I care if my mother never asked about it? She would have understood Alexis's Tupperware business better than this. She didn't know what I did, didn't want to know. She wanted someone who looked right in photos and knew how to giggle at cocktail jokes. She didn't want someone who broke up insurgent cells with whispered code and slept beside a pistol. Even after Rourke's stunned salute in that ballroom, she never asked about it, never followed up, never texted, never apologized. That was what broke me more than anything, because even shock, even the coffee spill, even the quiet ma'am wasn't enough to change her need for control. That was when I hit the real bottom. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a numb, echoing stillness that clung to everything I did. For days, I went to work, nodded through briefings, drank tasteless coffee. I stopped checking my phone, left emails from Alexis unread. I didn't even call back Rourke, who had texted, "I didn't know you were related to her. Should have warned me." What was I supposed to say? That I was used to this? That being invisible had become a comfort? It was easier to stay in the numbness than admit how deeply I wanted one person, just one, to say, "I see you. You matter." The only person who ever said that out loud was Elena, and she was buried 6 feet beneath where I left my patch. That night, I found myself in front of the mirror, still in work clothes, eyes red from nothing. I stared at my reflection. Then slowly, I picked up the small silver lapel pin I always wore at events. It looked like nothing to most people, a tiny insignia dull from wear, but to those who'd been on the inside it said everything. Rank, unit, operation. I clipped it onto my blazer again. Then I stood straighter. Not for pride. For memory. For Elena. For the girl I used to be in that desert. For the woman I'd tried to hide in every family photo. I wasn't going to chase my mother anymore. But I would stop erasing myself to make her world more comfortable. She could keep her perfect parties. I had something else now. Proof, witness, presence. I didn't make a plan for what came next. Not at first. But something started shifting after that night in the mirror. Something quiet, not a fire, not a rage. More like clarity. I stopped trying to rewrite the past. Stopped asking what if. Stopped wondering how things might have gone if I'd stayed home worn pink, kept my voice soft. Instead, I started listening to myself, really listening for the first time in years. It didn't come as an epiphany. It came in the little things, like the way I stood taller when I wore the pin again. The way my colleagues, who already respected me, seemed to notice something different in my posture. Not pride, not arrogance, just rootedness. I said no more often. I stopped answering Alexis's vague check-ins. I let silence hang, let the discomfort stretch. I stopped sending obligatory birthday texts, stopped pretending I was available for every holiday event. And I stopped making myself the quietest person in the room just to avoid being too much. In the meetings at HQ, I spoke more, sharper. I took lead on our next internal strategy review and presented a 3-phase framework for counter-influence campaigns that had the director of operations nodding for the first time in months. Rourke pulled me aside after and said, "I don't know what changed, but damn, don't dial it back." I just smiled, not planning to. He hesitated. I meant what I said. At the party. "I know, I hadn't seen you since the deployment. You looked different. Most people do out of uniform." "No," he said. "You looked centered. That word stayed with me. I wasn't healed, but I was centering." 2 weeks later, the second email came. Subject line: follow-up retirement gala photos and final program from the Palmetto Alumni Committee again. It was a PDF attachment with a photo collage from the event. Speeches, cake, Alexis holding a bouquet, my mother center frame accepting a glass plaque, and in the bottom right corner, a blurry photo of the coffee spill. Colonel Rourke frozen mid-motion, still staring toward the edge of the frame. And just at the border, half-cropped just enough to recognize me, back turned, walking away. In the caption, unexpected moment during Colin Rourke's arrival. I almost laughed, even blurred, even unnamed I was there. I had tilted the room, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do next. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't confrontation, it was confirmation. I called in a favor, nothing classified, nothing improper, just a small introduction request through an official liaison channel. Rourke signed off on it in minutes, which is how 2 weeks later I was invited to a regional security summit in Charleston. Closed door, not advertised publicly. Attendees mostly military and education sector leaders. The theme: psychological resilience and youth leadership in crisis environments. I volunteered to give a 10-minute talk, didn't advertise it, didn't send anyone in my family the event link, but I knew Alexis monitored those circles. I knew Mom still had her hands in education boards even post-retirement, and I knew word would get around. I wore gray this time, hair pulled back, simple makeup, clean black pumps, and the lapel pin. No rank, no fanfare. Just a name tag: Lauren Blake, Civilian Consultant, U.S. Defense PSYOP Liaison. When I stepped into the event hall, I scanned the crowd, small, maybe 60 people. And there she was, my mother. Not front row, not center, just off to the side, half turned toward the exit, like she hadn't decided whether she was staying. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I walked to the stage and waited for the microphone to activate. No slides. No flashy opener. Just me. Steady breath. Then I began. In psychological operations, we learn one truth quickly. If you don't control the story, someone else will write it for you. And if they write it well enough, you'll start to believe it's yours. I let the words hang. People shifted, eyes focused, but there's a difference between silence and strategy. And sometimes the most powerful move you can make is simply to stay in the room. I talked for 10 minutes, not about my family, not about deployments, just about the power of psychological influence, about presence, about how young leaders, especially girls, need to understand the weight of their words and the weight of their stillness. When I finished, the applause was quiet at first, then it grew. But I didn't look at the crowd. I looked only at her. My mother didn't clap, but she didn't look away. That was enough. Afterward, Rourke approached. "You ready?" I nodded. As we walked toward the back exit, I heard heels clicking behind me. I turned. It wasn't her. It was Alexis. She looked uncertain. Hair curled just like Mom's face, tight with something between pride and panic. "I didn't know you were," she started. "I know," I said gently. She blinked. "That was really good." "Thanks." "I think she's rattled." "She should be." Alexis looked down, then, almost in a whisper, "She kept your flag. From the funeral. It's still in the drawer." I didn't say anything, because I didn't need it back. Let her keep it. Let it remind her of what she refused to see. The next day, I drove home. Windows down, radio off. Not full of triumph, not bitter, just clear. I didn't win anything that day, but I didn't lose myself either. And that felt like the beginning of something better than revenge. It felt like freedom. 3 weeks later, I received a formal invitation in the mail. Heavy cream cardstock, gold trim, embossed lettering. "You are cordially invited to a private retirement dinner honoring Dr. Margaret Blake, 40 years of service in education and public youth policy. No RSVP required, just a line at the bottom, family preferred." I sat with the envelope in my lap for a long time. It wasn't guilt that made me consider going. It wasn't even the half-hope that she might have changed. It was something quieter. I'd spoken my truth in public. Now I wanted to stand in it in private. Not for her, for me. The restaurant was some historic place, downtown, white brick wraparound porch gas lanterns flickering against the summer dusk. Inside, everything was candlelit and too quiet. Linen napkins, wine glasses no one drank from, a long table with 16 chairs. 14 were filled. Alexis saw me first. Her eyes went wide, and then she quickly masked it with a smile. My mother didn't look up. Until I said softly, but clearly, "Hi, Mom." Every head turned, even hers. She blinked. "You came." I gave the smallest nod. "You invited me." She gestured vaguely. It was Alexis's idea. I looked at my sister. She looked away. I took a seat at the far end of the table, not at the head, not beside her, just there. The silence stretched thin. Someone cleared their throat. Toasts resumed. People took turns telling stories about Margaret Blake, the icon, the mentor, the visionary. Her former students praised her poise. Colleagues applauded her tireless dedication to reputation and standards. It was like watching a carefully curated exhibit, every piece polished, every memory sanitized. I listened, quiet, still. Then the man beside me, a local superintendent, nudged me. "You're Lauren, right? The daughter who works for the Defense Department." I nodded. He leaned in, whispering, "She talks about you sometimes. Said you're the sharpest of them all." I looked down at my napkin fingers tightening. "She ever say why I wasn't at the ceremony?" I asked softly. He paused. "Only that you were overseas." I think I almost laughed. Of course she did. "I wasn't overseas," I said, my voice barely above a breath. "I was at the gate. She just didn't want me inside." His smile faltered. His gaze flicked toward her. I let the silence fill the space again. Dinner came and went. Dessert arrived. More wine. And then finally my mother stood to make her speech. She wore pearl earrings and her usual lavender suit. Her voice was measured, graceful, every word precise, scripted. "Thank you all for celebrating this journey with me. I believe in legacy, in honor, and in raising daughters who understand that public perception is a reflection of personal discipline. I felt every eye flick toward me. She didn't look in my direction. Not once. To my daughters Alexis, who exemplifies poise, and Lauren, whose path has been unique, I say thank you for what you've taught me. I stayed still. Let her have her performance. Let them believe what they needed to believe. But as she sat down, she looked at me. Just for a second. And there it was. Not guilt, not regret, but fear. Not of me. Of the truth. The dinner ended. People milled about, shook hands, made small talk. I stood slowly gathering my things. That's when she approached me, alone, no witnesses, just us in the hallway near the restrooms away from the soft music and clinking glasses. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I know," I replied. "But you did." "Yes." She folded her arms. "Was it to make a scene?" "No scene," I said. "I just wanted you to see I could walk in, speak to you, and not break." Her face tightened. "You humiliated me at the gala." I raised an eyebrow. I didn't say a word. "Exactly." The silence stretched. I finally asked, "Do you really think your reputation is more important than your relationship with your daughter?" She flinched. "That's not what this is about." "No," I stepped closer. "Because from where I'm standing every time I became more of myself, you saw it as a threat to your image. Not your family, not your heart, just your brand. I never said you weren't smart. You said I was too much. You said I embarrassed you." Her voice cracked. "You came in wearing that pin like a warning shot. Like a dare. I wore it because I earned it." "You're still doing it," she whispered. "You're intimidating." "I'm not trying to intimidate you, Mom. I'm just not shrinking anymore." That stopped her. For the first time, she looked small. Not broken, not sorry, just human. And then she asked something I didn't expect. Did he really whisper it? That night, what everyone says, I stared at her. "Ma'am," she said, voice thin. "That's what they keep repeating." I nodded once. He did. And he meant it. Her mouth opened, then closed. A silence passed between us, thicker than any argument we'd ever had. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I just need you to stop pretending I don't belong at the table." She didn't speak. She didn't reach out. She just turned and walked away. And I let her, because I didn't need her permission anymore. I stepped outside into the night. The air smelled like rain and old brick, and I realized I wasn't angry, not anymore. Disappointed? Yes. Sad, maybe. But the fury had left me, and all that remained was space. Clean, wide-open space. Where once there had been the need to prove myself, there was now only this: I know who I am. Even if she never does. 3 months later, I stood in a room I never thought I'd return to. Not my mother's house, not the school where she built her empire, not even the stone hall where that infamous gala took place. No, I was at the Pentagon, in a briefing room, in uniform, standing beside Colonel Vance, the same man who dropped his coffee and whispered "ma'am" that night. We were leading a classified strategy session for a new interagency task force, one built to prevent the very breach I had exposed during my analysis a year ago. The same analysis my mother told me not to bother people with. Now it was policy, and I was one of the names on the charter. I caught Vance looking at me as I wrapped up my presentation, not with surprise, not with skepticism, but with something else: pride, not the kind born of legacy or family, the kind earned by fire. As the room cleared, he lingered. "Good work today," he said simply. "Thank you, sir." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I still remember that night." I tilted my head. "The gala." He chuckled. "The way you stood there, silent. People thought you froze." His gaze sharpened, but I saw what you were doing. You were assessing, watching, holding power until you needed to use it. I didn't reply, didn't need to. "I wasn't supposed to salute you that night," he added. "But sometimes protocol has to make room for truth." I smiled. That single moment had never left me. It was a crack in the mask. a fault line through my mother's perfect illusion. But more than that, it was a signal, a turning point. Someone saw me, someone knew. He clapped my shoulder once, then left. I remained in the empty room, not because I was stuck, but because I wanted to take it in, the silence, the authority, the reality. This was my life now, not in reaction to her, but because of me. That weekend, I drove back to Maryland. I didn't go to my mother's house, but I met Alexis at a coffee shop near the harbor, one of those cozy places that tried to look old but was secretly brand new. She was already there when I arrived. She stood and hugged me, tighter than I expected. We hadn't spoken since the retirement dinner. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Me too." We sat. It was awkward at first. Small talk, weather, office gossip. Then she lowered her voice. "Mom's been quieter lately." I raised an eyebrow. "Quieter." "She's been unsettled. I think your visit shook her. She invited me. She didn't expect you. The real you." I let that sit. Alexis played with the rim of her cup. "I used to think she was just hard on you because you were different," she said. "Now I think maybe she was hard on you because she was scared of how powerful you could be." I didn't respond right away. I was tired of diagnosing Mom. But Alexis looked at me, really looked, and then said, "You're the bravest person in this family." That did hit me, because she wasn't someone who gave away praise cheaply. She slid a small envelope across the table. "What's this?" "Something I thought you deserved," she said. "You can decide what to do with it." Inside a photograph, old, faded, from a classroom bulletin board maybe. It was a picture of me at 13, standing beside a science fair project on early radar systems. The corners were bent. My glasses were too big. My hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, but I was smiling. Not just with my mouth, with my whole face. "Where did you find this?" I asked. "Mom had it in a locked drawer." "Seriously?" Alexis nodded. "She kept it all these years." I stared at the girl in the photo. Bright, relentless, unashamed. The world hadn't gotten to her yet. Not fully. "I thought you might want to keep her close," Alexis said softly. "The version of you that never asked for permission." My eyes welled unexpectedly. "Thanks," I said. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more." I nodded. We were surviving in the same house. She smiled. "Next time I've got your 6. Back in my apartment, I placed the photo on my desk, next to my medals, my security credentials, and a quiet little frame that held no certificates, just one phrase printed in simple black ink. "You do not have to earn the right to take up space." It took me 33 years to believe that, to stop shrinking, to stop apologizing, to stop pretending that brilliance had to be hidden to be respectable. My mother may never say she's proud of me. She may never understand the weight of that night, or how I stood there silently, not out of weakness, but control. But that's okay, because somewhere a little girl with a radar project still believes she can see what others miss. And now she can. The colonel dropped his coffee. The room went still. He looked at me not like I was someone's daughter, but like I was the storm itself, and whispered, "Ma'am."